What is going on, guys? Pat in the shop. A couple videos ago I made a video about the water pump bypass and why it's important. That kind of sparked some people to send me an email about oil filter bypass and what the deal is with that. There's a lot of opinions out there on whether you should use an oil filter bypass, what it does, and like, do you need it? So I'm going to tell you what I do and why I've changed my tune about oil filter bypass over the years from experience and what I've seen. So hopefully you like this one. So here you got a block that I'm tearing down. It's just a small block Chevy. It's just a two-piece rear main seal, old school block. I think it's a 207. So I'm just using this as a demonstration, just getting this block ready. Sonic test is going out to the machine shop. It's good to go. But I wanted to show you here. So here on a small block Chevy, your oil filter bypass is actually built into the oil filter adapter. So this little piece, if you've ever wondered what that is, that's actually the bypass. So this is the top of the oil pump. So oil pump shoots oil down through the main cap here, down into this passage on the block, and then the oil goes through the oil filter and then up the center of the oil filter and distributes throughout the engine block. You know, the engineers have to kind of build something in, so if someone is not doing their oil changes and you have an oil filter plug up, there is a way for the oil to kind of bypass that oil filter. But most of the time in a hot rod situation, guys are changing their oil on a regular basis. They're not letting the oil filter plug up. They're using good oil filters typically. So that brings in the question, is the oil filter bypass necessary? I used to think, yeah, why not? It's not going to open. You know, I change my oil filter on a regular basis. You know, what is the purpose? You know, what is it hurting if I, you know, just leave it in there? And then that bring me to an engine I ran into where it kind of opened my eyes on the oil filter bypass. So a few years ago, we had a guy who's now a good customer of ours come into the shop and say he was having problems with a newly built motor he had put in. A local reputable place built the motor and whatever, but he ended up putting it in and firing it up himself. I don't believe the motor was broken properly. It was a flat tappet deal, just a regular small block Chevy, you know, mild cam, whatever. But I don't think it was broken in properly, which is, you know, that first 20 minutes of an engine firing is so critical to that life of the engine, especially when you have a flat tappet cam. And I'm gonna probably make a video about how to break in your motor and what I do and, you know, what I've seen to have good luck with. So that's probably gonna be an upcoming video. But anyway, so he had an issue with this motor making noise ever since. You know, he got it running and fired up and it just didn't sound right and whatever. So we started looking into it and yeah, sure enough, it sounded terrible. The valve train made a ton of noise and we started tearing into it to see what was going on. Inside a lifter, there's a retaining clip, and that's exactly what this is, and this holds the inside of the hydraulic lifter together. There's this little wire clip, and this clip really does nothing once the lifter preload's set. There should never be any contact against this lifter clip once the preload is set into the lifter plunger. But for whatever reason, because it wasn't broken in properly, something happened with the valve train that caused pressure to be put onto this clip, and it actually popped out of the lifter and made its way down into the oil pan. So, which is not good. You're already probably into obviously some lifters and a cam. You know, if you're starting to lose lash in your system, there's something going on. But unfortunately, the customer was into more issues, because what ended up happening is this clip somehow made it through this pickup screen right here. See how this one is all covered in crap, but made its way through through the oil pump, this wire clip. Believe it or not, I wouldn't believe it. Honestly, I wouldn't believe this if I didn't see it with my own eyes. It made it through the oil pump. You can actually see when I pull the oil pump apart, the like indents in the teeth of the oil pump gears where the clip went through the passages in the block, came out here. One piece It broke, I guess it broke into pieces when it went through the oil pump, or maybe before it went through the screen, but one piece held the bypass open. So this little spring-loaded piece here held that open. The next piece went through the bypass, through the passages, and took out all the main board. The crank was finished. Believe it or not, I honestly would have never believed it if I didn't see it with my own eyes, that this clip was able to make it from the oil pan, through the oil pump, through the bypass. Normally would have got caught in the oil filter, but it went past the bypass and wiped out basically the whole crank was wiped out, needed a whole new rebuild, and just from one piece. It went from basically a cam job to a full rebuild once again. So after that day, I really started thinking twice about an oil filter bypass, because obviously, you know, it had a new oil filter on it. It was running 1040. It wasn't running some crazy thick oil, like it was running like 1040 hot rod oil. But this piece of clip was able to make it past the oil filter through the bypass. They say in a perfect world that this bypass spring, I guess you could call it, is not supposed to push open until there's a pressure differential, I guess you can call it, from the oil pump pressure to the other side of the oil filter. So when there's like, I guess you call it a blockage in the oil filter exceeding 10 to 18 psi, depending where you get your information, that is the only time this should open. But you know, this car had a brand new, it was a Fram oil filter, I can remember that, on it. Maybe that was the problem, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it had a brand new Fram oil filter on it, brand new oil, and for some reason this bypass was opening. So that made me really start thinking, maybe with, you know, with a high volume oil pump, maybe this bypass is open more than we think it is, and maybe we're pushing oil through the motor that's not filtered by the oil filter. And after seeing that, I honestly believe this bypass is open more than we think it is. And I've been running no bypass for years now, and I'm going to tell you a couple things that I've noticed and a couple things that I would do if you plan on not running an oil filter bypass. First off, you need to run a good filter. I run a Baldwin filter. This is a B6. This is the bigger version. The smaller version. So B6 is the tall small block Chevy filter, and then B27 is the shorter one if you have issues with clearance. These Baldwin filters are super impressive. You hear a lot of guys talk badly about Fram filters, and honestly, you know, for a long time I really didn't think much of it. So the oil filters, you know, I know there's, you know, different qualities and stuff, but a Fram is a brand name that I felt like I could trust. So I started looking into it myself, and we actually went at the shop and started cutting oil filters apart. And this is before we really got into Baldwin filters, but we cut the oil filters apart to see what was going on inside, and I was actually kind of shocked when I saw what was going inside a Fram filter. Not only are the Fram filters thinner cased, they're really flimsy filters. The inside of them actually have this cardboard on the ends, and if you can see in the picture there, I cut apart a Baldwin and a Wix filter, and they are actually a metal end caps instead of this like crappy cardboard fiber board stuff that Fram uses. So ever since then I stopped using Fram. I've only switched to Baldwin, especially when you're not running a bypass, because these are a thicker case. When you're not running a bypass, you do run the risk of ballooning an oil filter. A lot of guys will tell you, oh, before you balloon an oil filter, you actually blow a seal out. But from experience and some of the guys that shop racing, I've seen oil filters balloon a little bit if you're not running a good Baldwin or a racing, but I've never actually blown a seal out. The thing they talk about too with the bypass is cold weather. Most hot rods don't see super cold weather, but my truck, for example, my C1500, I have a mildly built small block in there, but I'm actually experimenting with it because it's my truck I drive all year round, and it gets cold. Like, it's been under freezing the last couple weeks, and I've been running no bypass just to kind of see if I would have any negative effects, because apparently when the oil's thick, it can't get through the filter, and you'll actually have no oil pressure. What they say, you'll have no oil pressure when you first start it up. So I've been kind of watching my oil pressure on fire up and doing my own experiment to see without running this bypass. I have it plugged, and honestly, I've run 1040 in that truck. It's been it's been in the freezing every night lately, and in the morning when I fire it up, I have oil pressure instantly. That's with a Baldwin filter, running a good B6 Baldwin filter on there, and no bypass. So I'm not ballooning the oil filter, I'm not blowing the seal out like people talk about, and I have oil pressure right away. So I haven't seen any negative effects of not running the bypass yet, but I'm going to keep kind of keeping an eye on it and making sure. I don't want to do any damage to my engine, but honestly, I haven't seen any adverse effects yet. All right, so you can go and buy an oil filter adapter that doesn't have the bypass, but it's as simple as using your own one. You could just make your own. I'm just going to show you how to do that real quick. So all you got to do is see this little metal piece at the back. Just take a flathead screwdriver. It pops out very easily. That's it. All the guts fall out. So then all you have to do after you get that piece out is you're going to take a 1/4 inch pipe thread tap from the back side, so the opposite of the threaded adapter part, and you're going to tap that hole. And then you're going to take a 1/4 inch pipe plug like this, and you're going to put it into the back. This pipe plug, doing it this way, this pipe plug can't go anywhere. Once this is on the block, even if this falls out, which you don't want it to, and you're going to make sure it's tight enough that it doesn't, but even if it falls out, it can't go anywhere, so don't worry about that. And then that's what it's going to look like. Now you've made your own non-bypass oil filter adapter for, you know, whatever, couple bucks, whatever it costs for a plug, and you don't have to go and buy a fancy Moroso or whatever one. This works just fine. I've done this many a time. So in conclusion, am I telling you not to run an oil filter bypass? No, I'm not. I'm telling you that I don't run an oil filter bypass on my own stuff, and I don't run an oil filter bypass on customers' cars when the motor is new and we're breaking it in. Because here's why. When you have a new motor, you have cross hatching on that cylinders that's coming off, and if you've ever broken in a new motor, you're going to notice probably the first 3 oil changes that there's a fine kind of shimmer to the oil as the cross hatching gets worn off the cylinders. So I don't like to run a bypass, because now that I know that that bypass opens more than we think it does, I don't want that unfiltered oil with that debris in it getting embedded into the bearings. So when I don't run a bypass like at any point on my stuff, but during break-in on customers' cars, I don't run a bypass, and then we can switch to an oil filter bypass later on. So do yourself a favor. You can make the decision if you want to run one, but if you're breaking in a motor, I highly recommend not running a bypass, as you maybe the first 3 or 4 oil changes, and then you can make your decision after that. I have seen no adverse effects of not running a bypass yet. If I do kind of find out, you know, with this freezing temperature, if it's going to be an issue, I will let you know and say, hey, listen, I switched to a bypass. But right now, you just got to make sure, if you're going to do it, you know, no bypass, make sure you run a good oil filter, a Baldwin, a Wix filter, a racing oil filter, if that makes you feel better, because you'll notice if you take either a Baldwin or a racing filter, they're thicker. The casing's thicker. It's actually about 10 thou thicker, and they're just built way better. I actually believe, you know, I don't quote me on this, but I believe the Moroso racing filters are just Baldwin oil filters spray painted white, because I've cut both of them apart. They're identical in the size, or identical in size, and an identical thickness on the actual case of the oil filters. So there you go, guys. Hope you liked that video. If you have any questions, you know, send me an email or comment below. I'm putting out videos all the time. I'm a little lacking this week getting these videos out. Just been busy trying to get these motors together. I got some cool Vortec head stuff coming up soon. I got a set of Engine Quest, the Vortec copies. I got a set of Dart Iron Eagles that I want to show you, and some new Vortec videos coming out. So thanks, guys.